Hello, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. I have discussed the subject of critical realism many times on this channel, back when the show was called the Dr. Mark A. Foster Show. If you are interested in reading more about it, well, we will talk about it more in the future, but you can also go back and listen to the shows from the past where I go into critical realism quite a bit. What I am going to do today, however, is to discuss only two aspects of critical realism. Critical realism is a very complex philosophy, or as Roy Bhaskar, the founder, called it, a meta-theory. There are a lot of moving parts to it, and it's hard to really encompass it in a single presentation. Roy himself, although he was a wonderful man, was not the world's most spectacular writer, unfortunately. And if you pick up a book written by him and you have no background in philosophy or no background in social theory, it's difficult to make sense out of what Roy Bhaskar is talking about. Even if you do, you may need to read it 2 or 3 times in order to understand the gist of what Roy is getting at in his books and articles that he's written on the subject. The two basic things that we are going to talk about today in relation to Marxism, third worldism, or Maoism, third worldism, call it what you like, are copresence and demi-reality. Copresence and demi-reality. Both of those, I think, relate to the way in which the world is going right now, to first the present world, which, for the sake of simplicity, we will borrow Immanuel Wallerstein's term and refer to it as the capitalist world system. And the second will be the system that is developed by the third world, at least by the third world primarily, and we will refer to that as the communist world system. First, what is demi-reality? Then we'll get into copresence. Demi-reality, for Roy Bhaskar, was a translation of the word Maya. Maya is a Sanskrit word which is commonly translated as illusion. For Roy, it meant illusion. It also meant ego. It also meant disunity. It also meant separateness, the fact that people are apart from one another and cannot seem to link up with one another and form any kinds of meaningful connections. Perhaps it can be seen from another perspective as a kind of existential crisis. Wherever I go these days, including all over the internet, I see so many people experiencing existential crises. Sometimes I wonder why, but then when I go back to Roy Bhaskar's critical realism, it all makes sense. The capitalist world system is causing tremendous alienation in people. Alienation itself can be seen as another way of defining demi-reality. And the longer the alienation goes on, the fewer options people find, the more in crisis the world is. And the world is certainly in tremendous crisis. All over the world, there are disasters occurring. All over the world, there is climate change occurring. All over the world, there are forest fires and other types of natural disasters occurring. So, when we look at this system, which really was created by capitalism, and basically by capitalist greed, we can understand why people are feeling so much angst, which is basically a German word for anxiety. In fact, it comes from the same root as anxiety. It's not hard to understand it. If you look deep and you connect with people and you intersubjectively relate to another person's consciousness, You engage with people. You forget about the external parts of who we are, our physical appearance, how we dress, how we look, where we live. Those kinds of things are unimportant. The only thing that matters is where we are in our minds, where we are in our hearts, and where we are in our way of living. And the way of life, the culture of people throughout the world has continued disintegrating at an ever increasing pace. And so that basically is demi-reality. That is the world, the capitalist world system that we find ourselves immersed in. Many people don't realize why it is that we are experiencing so many problems. And yet we see it all over the place. We see people who are just basically unhappy. People who are dissatisfied with their lives, with their families, with their friends. Marriages breaking up. Of course, they have been breaking up since the end of the 19th century. But marriages are really, really in trouble. My neighbor, just across the path, had a horrible fight the other day. The wife called the police on her husband. I don't know what happened after that. All I know is that now they are back together again, at least for the time being. Now, why did it happen? Well, the immediate cause was the fact that the husband, whose name I won't mention, is an alcoholic. He drinks all the time. He is drunk all the time, although when I confront him about it, not in a harsh way, but really in an attempted friendly way, he denies being drunk. That is not an uncommon phenomenon among alcoholics. Now, he admits to being an alcoholic. He just refuses to admit that he's drunk when he is clearly drunk. His father, he lives with his father. His father is outraged by this whole thing. You can tell his father is literally at his wit's end. I try to talk with his father to say hello. His father usually ignores me. Once in a while he will say, "Hi, how are you doing?" The other day I said to him, "Oh, by the way, your son and daughter-in-law just took off for the day," and he said, "Thank you for telling me that." But his father is not very happy. They are living in one of the condos, in the condo complex where I am. They have no furniture at all in their condo. They have 2 airbeds. One is I've seen them. One is a single airbed, and the other is a double airbed. That is how they sleep. I asked Carlos, does he like sleeping on airbeds? He says, "No, I hate it." That's the problem. He doesn't get much sleep. I've tried sleeping on airbeds, or at least laying down on them, trying to go to sleep. I've never successfully slept on one, and it's awful. I can't imagine a less comfortable way of sleeping. I asked him, "Do you have a blanket? You can lay the blanket on the floor and try to sleep on the blanket." He just dismissed my suggestion. That is demi-reality. That is, again, the world in which we find ourselves, and we can't seem to find a pathway out of it. It is very tragic. Capitalism itself is demi-reality. The oppression of the poor by the rich, the oppression of people who are minimally educated by those who are more educated, the oppression of those who have very low status occupations by those who have more high status occupations. It's all around me. I live in one of the poorest counties in Texas. Now, where I live is not poor. This is a very nice condo complex. But you travel down the street a few blocks and you see the poverty. It's all over the place. People living in little more than shacks. It is really, really sad when you see other human beings having to go through that kind of suffering. And yet, just 3 miles to the south of me in Mexico, it's even worse. I occasionally will go down to Mexico. It's not the safest place to go, but I will go there anyway. And there's this one place called Nuevo Progreso, which is actually a pretty safe place to go. It's known for its medical tourism. You go in there, there are pharmacies, there are physicians of every imaginable specialty, there are dentists, there are optometrists, there are podiatrists, etc., etc. You walk in there, and it's like being in a carnival. These people on the street will start barking at you, "Please come into our pharmacy." Or sometimes they'll say, "Please come into our farmacia," which is the Spanish word for pharmacy. And because they're broke, they're poor. Now, medical treatment in Nuevo Progreso is very, very inexpensive. It's much less than what the average person would pay here. The problem is, I don't pay anything here because I have a really good Medicare supplemental plan. So I don't benefit by going there in that sense. I do benefit by going there and looking at the shops and talking with people and seeing what their experiences are like and trying again to understand them, to immerse myself in their minds and their hearts intersubjectively and to understand where they are. The experience I have in Mexico is what Roy Bhaskar referred to as copresence. Copresence effectively is the opposite of demireality. So if demireality is alienation, copresence is connection. It's literally the exact opposite of demireality. If you are living in the realm of demireality, you are cut off from all those or almost all those around you. If you are living in the realm of copresence, you are connected to each other. People in Mexico, many people in Mexico that I have met, they literally have nothing. They are living in the third world. Nuevo Progreso is a border town. It's relatively poor, but not as poor as some border towns are. And again, that's because so many Americans go there and spend the dollar there, and they are more than happy to accept the dollar. But I wonder sometimes about their private lives. Very few people that I have met who work in Nuevo Progreso actually live in Nuevo Progreso. They live in one of the towns or cities on the outskirts. Nuevo Progreso is a tiny city, a tiny town. You go to the back of the commercial area, which is really Mexico, it looks like Mexico, and you see nothing but broken down houses. Literally houses with their walls missing. I did not see a single person behind the commercial area. All I saw were small, friendly, barking dogs. And I sat down on the ground and I began petting some of them. I don't know what that area is. I don't know if people live there. I can't imagine people living in a home without a wall, but maybe they do. But it's hard for me to conceptualize it. How in the world could that possibly be? Nuevo Progreso, despite the fact that it is a border town in Mexico, has a lot of American money. Why would people need to live in those kinds of despicable conditions? So, what I think will happen is the capitalist world system, as dominated as it is by demireality, is in the process of disintegrating. In my own opinion, the first world, the world of the US, the world of Canada, the world of Europe, the world of Australia, the world of Japan, New Zealand, and so on, that world will simply be gone. And good riddance. The fact that I live here, I don't care. The United States in particular has done more damage, more harm to the third world than any other country in the world. We do not deserve the pleasure of continuing to dominate and exploit people living in the third world. So I think the time will come when the first world will simply disappear, be annihilated, nuked. I don't know, I'm just guessing. And then the third world, which I suppose at that time will just be the world, will take over. And through some type of revolution that I really can't imagine and won't try to imagine, establish the new communist world system. Now, will there be any part of the first world left? I don't know. Maybe. It's possible. I suppose that there may be isolated areas of the first world that remain. Predicting the future is not a good hobby for anyone, especially for me, since I tend to be really, really bad at it. Really bad. And I have tried many times, and almost every time I've tried, change that. Every time I've tried, I have been a miserable failure. And is that because of me? No, it's because the world is so precarious. It's because the world is so changeable, mercurial. It is hard to predict what it will be like tomorrow. You pick up a newspaper. You watch a newscast. You watch Sirius XM, as I do frequently. And you see nothing but disaster after disaster after disaster. What a horrible condition to live under. Now, how long the capitalist world system will last, don't ask me. I don't know. I hope not too much longer. Not because I'm a masochist at all. I'm not a masochist. I'm very compassionate toward people. But what I see is that the longer the capitalist world system drags on, the worse it becomes, and the more people continue to suffer. So from my perspective, if the capitalist world system were to end tomorrow, and hopefully end in a relatively rapid fashion, in other words, not much suffering, there'll be some, but hopefully not much suffering, and then the third world, the developing world, the global south, whatever you want to call it, will pick up and create a better tomorrow. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. Have a pleasant evening or a pleasant afternoon.